Let's start with quarterback, where I think I already said it earlier in the show. Quarterback has been rough the last few weeks. It has been very difficult to find guys that are worthy of getting into lineups. So we have some names here. I think the first two are probably the best two options. CJ Stroud versus the Raiders. He's 48% rostered. JJ McCarthy at the Giants. Mentioned him earlier, what he's been doing, and another good matchup for him. Hopefully he can take advantage of that. Tyler Shuck versus the Jets, who everybody's beating up on the Jets right now. Maybe he can do it too. And then I have to throw one in to round out the graphic, and just in case, Bryce Young versus the Buccaneers. Definitely don't have a lot of confidence in that one, but is there anybody there that stands out to you, Scott?
I think McCarthy for O'Connell, for the mobility, for the Giants matchup, at least all four of these quarterbacks are looking at favorable matchups. So as you play in the deeper leagues, as you play in the Superflex formats, you can play them with some level of confidence. Stroud, obviously, exposure to Nico Collins. He can turn any play into a touchdown. We saw Dalton Schultz really spread his wings. Higgins has had moments in recent weeks, and maybe with their running backs banged up, maybe they throw the ball more proactively. In those two quarterback / Superflex formats, I honestly wouldn't feel bad about any of these guys. Maybe it's because I'm still stinging from having to play some combination of Cook, Rivers, and Pickett last week. And in that Superflex league, I should have gone with Jacoby Myers. I should have played a receiver, got that one wrong. I hope it doesn't cost me on Monday night. But I think these are actually pretty pliable, pretty favorable quarterback twos. Now, if you're in a one quarterback league, you have a better quarterback. You're going to play him. Hopefully the Mahomes manager had a backup. This is why we talk about roster construction being different in December than maybe it is in September. Hopefully you already addressed that. But yeah, Stroud and McCarthy look especially good to me. But I think all four of these guys will at least be in that 14 to 16 acceptable point range on Sunday.
Agreed. And I think we've seen some ceiling games from Stroud and McCarthy more recently, which is probably why I'm looking at them and thinking that they're the pickups here. Obviously Stroud last week, 3 touchdowns. The Raiders are a team that they should, I would think, destroy and control, and that, Stroud might not be playing in the fourth quarter, but normally when that happens, we've seen enough points in the first 3 quarters, and the quarterback is normally a big part of those points. So hopefully he has a good game there. And then, McCarthy showing that he can run the ball, having these games where he has 3 touchdowns. Let's hope he gets another one against that Giants defense, which, is certainly a defense that is gettable. I want to keep moving, though. I don't want to spend too much time on quarterbacks. The other positions are more interesting. And at running back, we've mentioned some of these guys already. Michael Carter versus the Falcons. He's only 5% rostered, so he is going to be out there. People are going to be fighting for him. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, who ended up getting in there Sunday morning. We found out that Chris Rodriguez wasn't playing. JCM plays in a good matchup, comes through for everybody. We're not sure that he's going to be the starter this week. We don't know what's going to happen with Rodriguez. It's possible that the Commanders, with not a lot left to play for, with Jaden Daniels down for the season now, why not just let your rookie run it out? Why go back to a banged up Chris Rodriguez? So I think JCM is going to have a tougher time running against the Eagles, but he's someone that people could look to, although he's right up against that 50% rostered mark. Audric Estime going up against the Jets. This is Devin Neal getting hurt last week. We'll see if Devin Neal is able to play in this one. If not, Estime was the one. It was a bit of a committee. We saw Evan Hall also get some work there, but Estime was the one that was the lead back. He was more productive. And again, the Jets are just a matchup that you want a target. We don't often have 2 players on this list that are 0% rostered, but Estime and Jawar Jordan, the next guy, both 0% rostered, Scotty. So people can't message me and say, all these guys that you're talking about, they're already taken. They're not. I promise you they are not. You can go and get these players. Whether you want to is another story, though, Scott. Whether you want to have to play guys like Estime and Jawar Jordan, you might not want to, let's face it. But some managers are desperate, and at this point in the season with injuries, you might need a running back that you could throw into an RB3 flex type spot. Who do you like on this list, if anyone, to play potentially in the semifinals?
Yeah, it's exciting to see a couple of John Blutarski specials, the 0.0 roster tag. So not just widely available everywhere you can get these guys. They're available in my league, so they're available in your leagues as well. I mentioned Carter earlier that he won't impress you. You may not want to live with him snap to snap, but he's got 80 yards and a touchdown written all over him. I think you have them in the right order. Hopefully we get some clarity on the Washington backfield. JCM, as you mentioned, being a rookie, Rodriguez, a veteran player of 3 years, maybe it just makes more sense to see what they have in JCM. There's been times they haven't done that where I haven't really understood it, because Krosky Merritt has looked good to me past the eye test when he's played. Estime, I was impressed. I was surprised when he had a couple of catches on that final drive before the Saints kicked the game-winning field goal. And he looked quicker than I ever can remember. I don't know if he's lost weight, or I don't know if just I have different television now, different definition, something, my eyes playing tricks on me. But I'm like, that isn't the slow, sluggish Audric Estime I got used to in Denver, is it? I don't know. But they used him in that pass catching role. I would think he's got a reasonable floor here. So in the order you mentioned them is the way I would rank them too, where what I want you to do, dear listener, is pay attention to the Washington tea leaves, because JCM by game day could be a plug and play, could be a green light like he was in week 15, or if the wrong run out happens with their injury report, he could be somebody that's actually a red light. So you'll have a lot more intel on all these guys by the end of the week, but pay keen attention in Washington. I do think Carter is legitimately the first target.
I will say too, I mentioned in the waiver wire column that Blake Corum is rostered in 40% of leagues. So he's still out there in more than half of leagues, but we've talked about him like every week. Yep. And I don't think people need to know again to go out and pick up Blake Corum, but if he's available, I would pick him up over anyone on this list. You can know that. The other thing I'll say that makes Carter even more enticing, I don't think we've mentioned it yet, that they get the Falcons and the Bengals the next 2 weeks, right? So that game, the last game was against a tough defense. Now we're seeing the Falcons and the Bengals on the schedule. If you know that he's the starter, those are games that he can absolutely come through. And
the Cardinals are going to win fantasy championships. The Cardinals are going to win fantasy championships. They're not going to win anything in the NFL, but they're going to win. Jacoby Brissett has saved our seasons. Hallelujah.
I have one team that's in the semifinals in a league that is very important to me with friends from high school. And I'm already starting Trey McBride. I'm already starting Michael Wilson. Is it possible that Michael Carter will also get into that lineup? We're going to find out later this week. Fortunately, in that one, I can talk about it, though, because I have the most fab left. So I get to just dictate whoever I want to pick up. I don't have to worry about them sneaking in there over me. And yeah, Estime, I think because of that matchup, I wouldn't be surprised if he's the guy that goes off 60, 70 yards and a touchdown in this game. And I've been fairly surprised at times at the Saints offense this year. And Devin Neal was starting to put up some okay stats as well. So maybe Estime is somebody that you could look at on that one. If we move to receivers here, the list, they're all guys that I like, let's face it. But at this point in the season, you'll have varying degrees of how you feel about putting them in your lineup. The first one, Jaden Reed, he's going up against the Bears. We saw Christian Watson get hurt. It sounds like it's not going to be really serious, but I'd be surprised if he gets out there and plays this week. And Jaden Reed, back-to-back games now with over 50 scrimmage yards. We've seen him have these stretches before where he gets really hot and turns into like a wide receiver 2 or better for fantasy. I wonder if we could see something like that from him if Watson's out, even though the Packers will probably continue to spread the ball around, let's face it. But Reed is a guy that gets a lot of touches. They like to kind of scheme him different things. And with Watson out, all of a sudden, maybe we could see him get even more. Luther Burden, I mentioned earlier, the injury, that's one we're going to have to watch with him. But Rome Odunze, I don't think is going to be back anytime soon after aggravating that foot, that stress fracture. So Luther Burden has really emerged as that top guy. He'll battle with DJ Moore if he's healthy. If he's not healthy, then we could look at some other guys, and I will update the article if we get any sort of updates between now and the end of Tuesday when everyone's setting their waiver claims. And then Adonai Mitchell against the Saints. This has been a real roller coaster, Scott. I mean, he had a big game a few weeks ago, then he has a down week, and then this week comes back and finds the end zone. He's a personal favorite of mine. And the Saints aren't the worst matchup for him, but I think he's just going to be that boomer bust play for you. And then Jalen Coker really started to come on now, over 50 yards in 3 of his last 4 games. The Buccaneers are banged up in their secondary. Not exactly a scary matchup here, and he's finally emerging as that number 2 option for the Panthers. So how do you feel about those 4 there in terms of potentially playing them in the fantasy semifinals?
Yeah, I'd prefer not to. Again, I think you have them in the order I'm going to have them in, but they're all wide receiver 4 or 5s to me. Green Bay just loves its rotation at receiver. We always were screaming for more targets for Watson, more targets for Tucker Kraft when he was healthy. They've never had a player on their roster since Devontae Adams left to get past 100 targets. Alan Lazard's 100 targets is the gold standard since Adams moved on, and that's how they play offense. So if you get Reed and you're grinding him, you're watching him and sweating it out, you're going to be like, is he even on the field? Wait a minute. He just had a nice
Yeah.
play. Why is he running the sidelines? Why are they throwing passes to their third tight end or their fifth receiver? That's what the Green Bay Packers do. But he's the best talent here. With Burden, obviously, it would come down to the health of other pieces here. And Green Bay is a less than ideal matchup, although Denver did throw the ball pretty well on that defense last week. Mitchell liked the player. I think the Jets did really well to get him as a throw-in in the trade that they made with the Colts. Maybe they can get something here. He's gotten downfield. I don't think Cook looked overmatched in his first game. It looked like he at least belonged in the NFL, which is all you can really ask. I wish I could say that about Kenny Pickett right now. But I would play any of these guys if I had, maybe you had lost Watson and Adams, right? Maybe you lost a couple of guys and you have to dip down to this tier. They're all wide receiver 4 or 5s to me. I might move Coker up as high as 2, maybe wide receiver 3. That's maybe the one thing I feel a little bit differently about. It's a good matchup for Carolina. I realize it's hard for Bryce Young to be trusted, but you would think they would throw the ball on Tampa Bay, generally a funnel defense. So maybe I like Coker just a skosh more than you do. But mostly these are depth plays. These are not players you're going to start proactively in week 16.
All right, moving over to tight ends here. I already mentioned Colston Loveland going against the Packers. He's kind of been a name that's been brought up, week after week on this show. Dalton Schultz versus the Raiders. He's right up against that 50% rostered mark at 49% rostered. Colby Parkinson, the guy that I think we really should focus on here. He's the one that I wrote up in the article, even though I mentioned all these guys. I think we both feel really strong about him as a potential tight end 1 this week. And then Theo Johnson versus the Vikings. Theo Johnson with a bunch of 70-plus yard games. He's coming on a little bit in an offense that needs him to, because they don't really have a ton in the receiving core. But he's also somebody you could look at as a streamer.
Yeah, I'll just say really quick. I think Loveland and Schultz are probably gone in a lot of competitive leagues. I want you to try to pick up Parkinson, even if you don't need him, so he's not used against you. But again, I think you have the ordering right. And I think Parkinson's a proactive pickup and probably the most widely available here.
One deep stash I do want to mention, I could have brought him up during the running back section. We were talking about all those injuries. Jaleel McLaughlin on the Broncos. RJ Harvey banged up his ribs. Often you can play through that. They'll pad you up. Maybe you take a shot and you get out there and play through the pain. We don't know the severity of the injury yet, though. I haven't seen an update on it. So he's sort of a preemptive pickup. Maybe we'll get an update on Tuesday about that one. But Jaleel McLaughlin's certainly somebody that could end up being a starter for the Broncos this week. And if he is, he's just going to crowd that, RB3 type range. He'll have a little bit of upside if he can find the end zone. But another guy that I think should be picked up just in case he ends up in the starting lineup this week.
Right. Yeah. You do such a great job with that deep stash piece. And it's all about being a week early, right? Getting these players for free or getting them on your terms, as opposed to having to elbow the rest of your room out of the way when it's obvious to everybody a week ahead of time. So I hope you've been taking advantage of the deep stash pieces, because there's been so many hits there.